All right, traders, just a quick recap for Friday after the close here before we head into the weekend. But I wasn't uh, s- sending out recaps for Friday, but a couple of the Fridays have been really interesting in terms of option activity or just market action. Today it was more option activity that was really interesting. As I have a chart in front of you with the S&P, and we're really just not moving all that much. Or today, I should say. I thought we might have a little bit of a end of day rally, but we just didn't get it, which is fine. Sometimes you just have to be a little bit patient, but. There was some really great signals for today, which I'm going to get to the option signals or option trades that we got today. But just take a look at the S&P chart. This is why I have the value area study on my chart. Because it really just kind of gives us a sense of whether or not we're in a range for the day, or if we're trending. So we really didn't see that with the S&P, the Qs, or small caps. I can go over three of those charts. They all kind of look the same. A lot of chop going on there. And the other thing that was pretty interesting to me was look at the move in the bonds today. Holy cow! To borrow from my from the notorious sports announcer Phil Rizzuto. Look at the move in bonds down 1.1% today. Even TLT was down more than that. There's a little bit different duration between the long bond and TLT, but we could look at TLT, which was down 1.5% today, and so we didn't really see the banks move too much today, but they were weak this week, and I started to look at some charts. We saw some call activity, so I guess I'll start with the banks, that sector first. But this kind of looks appealing to me. A move back to the 50-day moving average. This was call buying earlier in the week in Citigroup, and then Morgan Stanley, which we really didn't see much call buying in, but I think it still looks pretty good, and I think it's best to breed. A move back to this 50-day moving average. We'll have to see how this works out next week, but I would think that this move in rates is giving us kind of a little bit of a heads up. This should be good for the banks. When TLT goes down, interest rates go up. Higher interest rates are generally pretty good for the bank. So a move like this, down 1.5% in TLT, and the bonds didn't, and the banks didn't move at all, I have to think might be setting up for possibly a move higher in the banks, as long as TLT continues to do that. Was really shocked that they did not move, and they have been under pressure this week. If you look at the regional banks, they kind of came back in, and they even finished down on the day, even though a favorable rate environment with that move in TLT, no impact there whatsoever. So keep that on your watch list for next week. Wells Fargo was another name that they bought yesterday in calls. Just to kind of go through some of the option activity for today, and then I'll go through a few of the sectors. But we did see the call buy. Speaking of the banks, that was the first trade that we saw today, which was buying in the KBE ETF. KBE is a little bit different than KRE. KRE is the regional banking ETF. KBE is all banks. So both your small and large money center banks are in there. We saw a bunch of nice trades today that in names that have had a pullback. So you're going to see this in like five different names that I'm going to go over. But GM, settle back down to the 50-day moving average. UPS, we saw some calls. This one also, I don't know where the moving average is. Oh, this is the 200-day moving average that we've come back into for a nice bullish engulfing bar for UPS, right on the 200-day moving average. And similar stories here with, there's a couple other one, Met, which I thought had a pretty good earnings report. Kind of came back in and, boom, into support. A call buyer shows up. So I think there was one or two other names where we saw this in today, which I can't find it. But let me just keep going through the rest of the activity. EPD, so some more energy buying out to February. Even though oil was a little bit weak today, oil did bounce back from the lows, but got hit pretty hard at one point today. A little bit of Microsoft calls, Met calls I just mentioned. It looks like I have Met on here twice, so that's a duplicate. And then Western Digital, a name that we haven't really seen too much activity in. The only thing I didn't like about this is how short dated. They bought November 24th, which is just 2 weeks away. So then they also came in and bought December calls in Western Digital. So I originally bought the November 24th as possible day trade. It didn't really catch today. So I went ahead and rolled them out to the December calls. Um, but yeah, it just didn't really catch. But sometimes you have to be a little bit more, um, you know, structure your trades a little bit differently than what was on the tape. I don't know the reason why they're buying a big block of calls going out 2 weeks, but I think the chart looks fine. This is one of those tech names that hasn't really participated at all in the last couple months, but it looks like it's just kind of, kind of a what do they call these patterns? Not a coil pattern, but like a triangle pattern. So it looks like it's on the upside of the triangle. It's on the top of value, just closed above it. So I would pay attention to this name next week and look for maybe a move up to around 94.37. That's a VPOC that's sitting up there. So this name gets a little bit of momentum. I think it might be interesting. So I did restructure. I took down that day trade and rolled it out to December. But that was one of my favorite trades of the day. And I think just kind of goes with the theme of just seeing a bunch of call buying and names that haven't participated or a little bit of dip buying. Netflix, they went after Netflix like crazy today on the dip today. So this worked out really well. We did a trade. I did a trade that calls that expired today for 4 cents. I bought them and I took targets up to 25 cents. So I didn't feel like really putting on a new trade at the end of the day, so that was what I did. But they went out to December. They also went out to January. Aggressive trades. Juno, another name that had a lot of momentum. Look at this move here at the end. This was all at the end of the day. There was some next week's calls that went up. So this has been a name that's been circulating about possible takeout that could be brewing in this name. Moved up big last week and moving up again. So some calls purchased there. PayPal, they don't even give you a breath with some of this flow that we've been seeing. PayPal, if you're waiting for a dip in this one, my goodness, you just are not getting one. So it's just been up and to the right 45-degree angle. Maybe a little bit of a move back Thursday yesterday when the whole market pulled back, but these names at this point, I think you just want to stay long and try not to be too cute with them. Same thing with Square, give you a little bit of breather into earnings, and then look at this thing pop today. Here was your brief move, right after the earnings report, which Square had great numbers, great numbers, beat on every metric. They gave you a slight move down right after the earnings report. That was down to $35 and it's now up to $39. So they continue to buy. That was one thing that we noticed in the trading room was that they bought like crazy after the earnings report. They bought more today in Square. So just crazy. Then speaking of crazy, more Micron. I mean, it's like every day with Micron. Every time there's just a tiny bit of weakness, they just keep coming and coming and coming in Micron. So unbelievable calls, huge big block in April calls, as well as the January 2019s, which we saw earlier in the week too. I mean, just monster trades that are going up in this. In this space. Here's a couple of just to see how you can see how these trades look. But $1.4 million, $2.8 million trade. It's just really nutty, I would say. They've been also buying a lot of JD. There's a nice JD May call buyer, which we've seen at several times this week. They've been going out to May. 2 events for JD next week. Well, Singles Day, which is already, I guess, has started. And as well as earnings next week. So that's a name to also keep on your radar. And then they bought Alibaba calls as well a couple times today. So some really interesting stuff. One of the things I'll leave you with is take a look at this ETF, FXL. Look at the volume that's been going up in FXL the last couple days. Let me just bring this in up one more time. So take a look at this thing. This is this is one of the energy. Excuse me. This is FXL is the technology alpha index ETF. So if you've been wondering why some of these names like OLED, CGNX have been going up, there's been an underlying bid this week to this group. Somebody's been buying the hell out of this ETF, and of course it's going to drive it up. Look at the volume today. So somebody's really starting to, or has been, I would say. I mean, 26 million shares. Notice the volume. This is really strange that it was that much volume today. Is that right? Let me see if there's a big print that went up. Yeah, I guess some big prints went up after the close in this thing that are kind of skewing it. 3.9 million shares and 9.6 million shares going up at 51.99. Huh. So big prints going up after hours in this thing. But even without those, it was still a lot of volume and a lot of inflows going into this particular ETF. So that's it. So the takeaway from this today, with the market being flat and some of these names moving, some of them not moving, I think you just have to be a little bit patient. And sometimes you just don't get a perfect day every day with the market, grinding higher. I think paying attention to the option activity in some of these names, sometimes it doesn't happen that day. You just have to kind of keep them on your radar and just sit and be patient, and then the momentum kicks in. So plenty of names to look at. I think there was about 5 or 6, and again, it's tough because you can't trade every one of these names, but you just kind of have to keep them on your radar, set an alert where they might be breaking out on your screen, and then you can capitalize on them. So that's it for today's recap. Have a great weekend, and see you back in the trading room. Thanks, everybody.